7 years ago, the melodic metal band Theocracy came out with its tour de force called Ghost Ships. And it's an album filled with punch and hooks and more punch. And per usual, it's a record about faith in its many aspects. And then nothing for 7 long years. Perhaps it was the biblical 7 years of famine. But that time is at an end. The new Theocracy album called Mosaic is out on October 13th. And as usual, it's the brainchild of Matt Smith, the frontman and vocalist. I'm Mark Boardman of Sonic Perspectives, and today we talk with Matt Smith about past, present, and future. Matt, welcome to Sonic Perspectives.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here and great to speak to you again, as always.
As always. I gotta start things off with a quote from the liner notes. Thank God for the opportunity to do this one more time when I didn't think it would happen. Why did you think it would not happen?
Well, there were a few reasons. As you mentioned, the 7-year break is quite substantial, and that wasn't planned. I hit a point after Ghost Ship, our last record, where I sort of hit a wall, and I was really burned out from those albums. All take so much out of me. So doing 4 of them plus the shows, the tours, plus all the travel for work and working with other bands and studio stuff. I just kind of I hit a point where I didn't know if I could do another one. So I told the guys I needed some time, so there was already going to be a bit of a break, and then COVID happened, and then we got a new guitar player, and then we had to find a new record label, and so all this stuff started piling up, and suddenly it was, believe it or not, 7 years later, which I have a hard time believing, because to me it still feels like about 4 or so. Mm-hmm. And I was saying this earlier, to some other people, but it's funny because the gap between the first Theocracy record and our second album, Mirror of Souls, that was 5 years, and that felt so much longer than this gap, and probably for a couple of reasons. One, I was so young, so time feels different, as you're younger, and then also, only having one album out, it was pretty nerve-wracking as far as is anyone even going to remember, who we are, because we didn't have anything. So this one doesn't feel nearly that long, but it was, there was going to be a gap anyway, and then everything sort of compounded and turned it into much longer than it was going to be.
Was there a moment in time where you realized, maybe this will happen?
Yeah, I wrote, there's a song on the album called The Sixth Great Extinction, and I wrote that, and so I was like, okay, there's something new, and we had kind of, back then, it was in that phase where everybody was putting out surprise singles all the time, mm-hmm. and instead of albums, and so we talked about that for a bit, just kind of releasing it as a standalone thing with no pressure, and see what happens. And then once that ended up not happening, and then a couple other songs came, and then it starts to feel like, okay, I guess we do have another album. So that was a relief.
But there wasn't anything that sort of you noticed broke the jam and made the music start coming out again?
Not really. I can't think of any one specific thing. I think it was just time, sort of the cumulative effect of having time to take a break from it, and probably also have that pressure kind of off, because even I myself didn't have it hanging over my head of I have to write for another Theocracy album, mm-hmm. because I didn't know if it would happen. So it's probably just a combination of those things, and having enough time to sort of catch my breath and find some inspiration.
What were you doing in the meantime?
Lots of work. I mean, I have several jobs, and I travel all the time, and I work with other bands, and so there was never time off, as far as, I mean, I took some time to relax, when I could, but it wasn't like, months of laying around doing nothing or anything like that. But Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I tend to psych myself out with mental pressure sometimes, so I think having a break from that and not feeling like people were waiting for something or expecting something to come right away, I think was a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, several reviewers have said that this, in their opinion, is more of a thrash album than, I guess, say, Ghost Ship. Are they right? Was there an intent on your part to make this a little bit harder edged?
No intent. I think I can see that, for sure compared to Ghost Ship. I think, that thread and that style has always been in what we do here and there. But there was no, I never, when I write, I never think about planning anything out stylistically or moving more in this direction or that direction. It's just whatever comes out naturally, and that's what came out. I mean, the only thing that I can say is done intentionally in that way is maybe, I once I get most of an album together, maybe I can kind of sit back and look at it with perspective and kind of see what it's, say, oh, this album, for example, I think Return to Dust, which was the first single, I think was the last thing that I wrote for this album, because when I listened through it, it was missing a mid-tempo anthem song like that. And so once in a while, I'll do something, I'll flesh out some ideas that I already have just to make the complete experience more, make it more of a complete journey, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
but no, there was no sitting down ahead of time and planning it out. It just came out that way.
When you feel like you've got to complete an album with a mid-tempo anthemic type song, I know you've got some pieces of thought and songs that are probably stashed away, but is it hard then to expect yourself to, well, this is the kind of thing I've got to come up with? Does that make it difficult?
I with what I was saying earlier about how I tend to sort of psych myself out, you would think so, but it's actually not. I also kind of work well under pressure, I guess I've noticed. There have been several, I can even think back to the song Theocracy, the title track from our very first album. That was kind of written like that under a deadline, to sort of fit something that I felt was missing. And yeah, it's not really as much of a challenge, I guess probably because by then the album's mostly taken shape. So, you know, I know worst case scenario, I've still got some pretty good stuff, even if we can't, complete it perfectly or whatever. So usually it works out pretty well. And like you said, I always have ideas stashed away anyway. So it's just a matter of kind of looking through them and finding something that fits.
Mm-hmm. One thing that my early impression was, after hearing the album a few times and looking at the lyrics, it seemed a bit darker to me than Ghost Ship was. A little bit more of bleak, um, a little bit more of what kind of damage have we done to things? Shall we sing a song while the world is burning? Comes from Insidious. Um, is that one of the things, maybe not intentional, but is that the way it came out?
I think so. I think that's fair. Yeah, and it wasn't intentional. I think it was just sort of it's impossible not to kind of have your eyes open to the things going on around you. And I mean, especially here in the US, between those two albums, there were some tumultuous times, with as unrest and politics and ugliness. And so I think, I don't know that songwriters have necessarily a responsibility to talk about certain topics. That gets into a whole different thing. But for me, if I'm being honest, and I'm, I mean, so much of coming from a Christian perspective, so much of what we deal with, and what I also try to write about is sort of, you know we don't necessarily fit in, as far as, it's the whole cliche of being a pilgrim or a stranger in a strange land. And so that kind of pops up a lot, here. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of kind of on that theme, reflecting on, you know, where do we fit, and what is our calling and our duty to kind of be a light in the middle of all this darkness, and to even if we can't necessarily make things better in the big picture, at least we can influence the people that are in our sphere, and have the, leave the right, do the opposite of leave damage in our wake, I guess. Heal where we can on a micro level, and then not worry so much about the macro level.
Mm-hmm. The sixth great extinction certainly fits into that, talking about the damage that human beings have done to the environment and to our world. And certainly that's one of those things where people need to get shaken up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really, it's not even so, it uses sort of the imagery of those things in terms of physical damage and to the planet, to the environment, things like that. But it's more allegorical in terms of looking at, I guess, spiritual parallels to that type of thing, and asking, sort of taking a look at the old Nietzsche thing of the God is dead, or man is dead, or who is really dead, and what does death really mean? When you're sort of thinking with the spiritual lens. And so yeah, I think that's a fun one, because it was kind of the first one that came out this time, and it's sort of, I think it's kind of open to interpretation, which is how I like to leave at least a little bit of that, which is sometimes tough to do in what we do, but I think as a listener, I always appreciate it. So I'm sure other people do as well.
By leaving open the interpretation a little bit, does that give you the opportunity to reach out more to people who may not be of faith like you are?
Sure. I think, it's funny because I never really think about that consciously, because I just, that gets to be too much of a responsibility for, I think it's kind of, I would have a hard time approaching writing or art, worrying about those things. But the way it's worked out so far is that seems to be the case. I think it's because, our music has never been sort of blinders on, and everything is great in the world, kind of shallow. There's always been a human element, and because to write something, I have to feel it. So, even if all the songs aren't coming from a personal place as far as experience or whatever, there has to be something there that I can, latch onto. And so I think people, regardless of belief, at least can appreciate that, because there's always been that side of sort of human struggle, going back to what we were saying earlier about kind of, where do we fit in all this, and what, how should I conduct myself as I kind of navigate, this new world that we're in. So I think it seems like to this point, thankfully, people have responded to that, whether they're, coming from a Christian perspective, or I hear that all the time. I'm actually not a Christian, but we love your music because of, this or that, and they can relate to it. And I think people kind of latch onto the honesty, I guess.
Mm-hmm. How much, as a Christian, do you feel a responsibility that you've got to share, you've got to testify, whatever term you want to call it, in terms of your music?
I feel a responsibility in that thread is always there, but I don't feel it so much in terms of every song has to be some kind of blatant, call to the gospel or whatever you want to say. I think we do a lot of songs that sort of open those conversations, which I think is kind of how life works. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just, to me, it's not it would kind of be the opposite of art to just have everything be, you know, the same over and over and over again. So it's one of those things that I don't shy away from it, and I'm proud of it, and I'm happy to talk about it, you know, if people ask. But there are so many things kind of under the umbrella of that. So I tend to write more about, you know, whatever's on my heart at the time, you know, and that could be, you know, anything from, you know, as we touched on earlier, things kind of that I'm seeing that are going on, you know, in society at the moment, or you know, really personal stories or anecdotes, or something kind of historical that that's on my heart for whatever reason.
One of those that I think fits several of those, as a matter of fact, whether it be historical, allegorical, whatever, is Red Sea, which is the nearly 20-minute epic, which is really a pretty amazing song. The more I listened to it over and over again, I thought I heard someplace that you had the start of that back when you were like 19 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, I wrote that song when I was 19. That's one that was the last from the archive. So I you know, there was a selection of material that I wrote before the first Theocracy album came out, and you know, most of it was really bad, and you know, then there were some good ideas scattered in there, and they've all come out now, you know. I mean, I'm just trying to think of examples. I know, you know, Martyr from Mirror of Souls, that song was from way before the first album, and Red Sea was the last one that I was hanging on to that we hadn't done anything with, because it was juvenile in a way, because I was so young when I wrote it, and it just needed so much work. And so it was one of those things where, you know, it was always in the back of my mind, you know, is are we ever going to do Red Sea? Is it good enough? Is it, you know, I don't want to throw the whole thing out, because there's some good ideas there, but is it sort of salvageable into something that can be shaped into something good enough to go on a Theocracy album? So when COVID happened, I took the time to kind of, for the first time, revisit it, and I sat down and I kept what was good there, and I rewrote other parts, and I tossed some parts, and I wrote some new stuff, and I did a demo of this new version, and sent it to the rest of the guys, and to my surprise, they all just loved it, you know, and said, yeah, we've got to work on this, you know, this should come out. So that was you know, that was a good moment too, because, you know, I don't remember exactly at what point in the process that was with the other songs, but, you know, several of the other songs had been written. So once that got the green light, and it's kind of started to feel like, okay, now we have an actual album, you know, because we've got an epic, and we've got these other stuff, so it's actually going to happen. So yeah, I'm thrilled with the way it came out. You know, it like I said, it needed some work, but most of the stuff was already there. So it was just a matter of kind of taking what I've learned, you know, since way back then, and kind of bringing it up to speed.
It's a real guitar song. Obviously, all of your songs are, to whatever extent, but so many guitar solos or passages, shifting rhythms and melodies throughout, which keep it, I think, fresh and interesting as it moves from point to point to point. And then the choral aspects for which you are known, especially towards the end as it builds up, really gives, I think, an impression, an impressive coda to the whole thing. Is that what you were aiming at?
It was, yeah. Thank you for that. And that's how it was originally. You know, it was just a matter of kind of making some of the stuff in the middle more seamless and a little more mature. But yeah, I think thinking back to back then, it's sort of the same as it was with Mirror of Souls and all the longer things that I've done, which is that I never plan on them being as long as they end up. It's just,
Yeah.
it starts out, oh, this is going to be an 8-minute mini epic kind of situation, and then once the story happens, and it's like, all right, we've got to fit all this in, we've got to wrap this up, and suddenly, it's kind of, I guess, the same concept as the how the 7 years went by since the last album. You kind of look down and suddenly it's 19 minutes. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why it was such a no-brainer as the last song, because of the way that grand finale comes back around, like you were saying, and a nice coda to some of the earlier moments.
I will admit that the first couple of times when I listened to it and it got to that choral section at the end, I heard what I thought to be a reflection of Like a Prayer by Madonna in there. And
Really?
I mean that in a positive sense, because I like that song, but
Right.
I sort of heard the same melody go through there briefly.
Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to listen to that song. I haven't heard that song in so long. I'll have to see if I can
Check it
catch
out
what you're
because
hearing. Yeah.
it's really interesting to hear that. And I've listened to the album probably 15 times, and I go, yeah, I'm not nuts. That's what it sounds
Wow.
like.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
Theocracy and Madonna, like
Yeah,
this.
we might do a cover for a bonus track. You never know
Exactly
what's coming
right.
up.
Um, as you said, many of your songs deal with faith or with other aspects of the world. Oftentimes they're mixed together. But the greatest hope is different, and it certainly stands out on this album, not only because it's a little bit quieter, more relaxed, but lyrically it's a little bit more difficult to grasp what the heck is going on here. So I'll ask you, what the heck is going on there?
Well, without getting too much into super specifics, it was, I think I was between these albums, the concept of death was on my mind a lot, legacy and kind of what we leave behind and what we live for while we're here, and those things. I lost all my grandparents between those albums, and other family members dying and things like that. So it was just kind of on my mind, and so that's really what that song's sort of a I guess a conglomerate of different people and different situations, and really just about death, and that shows up in you know kind of a lot of the album when I sat back and looked at it from more of a distance, which was a little surprising because it wasn't planned. But I mean, same thing with Return to Dust and some of these other songs, just from different perspectives. And yeah, that one is real, I guess, real personal, as far as just that side of losing people that you love, and having something to look forward to, beyond this life. And so that's what it's about.
The first line talks about reaching 18 years old. And the first thought that came to my mind was, here's a song about Truman the cat. Because Truman lived to be 18.
He did. He
Yeah.
did. He
But
did. Yeah,
I'm guessing I was out in a limb on that. And
no, there's lots of little things in there like that. Like I said, I mean, it was yeah, I mean, not getting into specific people as much,
yeah.
but yeah, there was, you know, we lost a lot of people that we loved, and that's kind of, I tried to fit, do it in a way that was kind of, I think when you listen to the song, it can be about almost anybody that someone has loved, whether it be, like I was saying, grandparents or aunts and uncles, or parents, or children even. I don't know. I mean, I kind of, the way these things always work is so, I mean, that's to me, personally, where I can really see God so much in what we do, because so many times, these songs, the things people say to me after shows, and how, oh, this song kept me from committing suicide, and this song saved our marriage, and this and that, and things that I had not even envisioned at all, that's so beyond what anything I could do, or had even thought of. So so I think that's another good example of one that sort of can kind of reach people wherever they are. I mean, everyone has experienced some level of grief, some much more than others, and so hopefully that song will be a little help to people.
Yeah, not only dealing with the grief and the mourning that comes from grief, but the fact that there is a light at the end of that we gradually make our way towards, as we hopefully get back to whatever normal life is closer to being.
Right. Yep, absolutely. That's the gist of the song. I mean, that's the hope of it, like as it says in the title. And it's funny because I wasn't even planning to write that. I just went to, there's a park that's kind of near my house that I'll go to sometimes to sit by the water if I'm trying to write something, and that's what happened that day. I just brought a guitar, and that's what came out.
I guess it must be not having that kind of creative sense. It must be moving to be able to have those things that come to you, whether you're in the park or whether you're in the studio, but they come to you and just sort of, you need to express them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so thankful for that. That's always been, even early on, that's why I needed to write songs. I kind of, it was almost like I didn't have a choice in the matter. I'm thankful that I have that outlet to be able to get those things out, because a lot of times, sometimes it can be like I don't even want to write. I'm it's almost like I was talking about earlier about being kind of working well under pressure, I guess. Sometimes it's okay, I need to write a song this week, or we're missing something for the album, and then you look at something like that afterwards, and I'm thankful that it came out.
Is it a calling?
Sure. I think so. I things like that always make me feel, yeah, I don't know. I always worry about coming across as too self-important or something like that but I think, it's just using the gifts that I've been given, in a way that that for me, brings glory to God, and hopefully brings some sort of added value to the world, and to people's lives. I mean, there's so, I'm far from a critic or a snob about, I mean, there's so many musicians out there greater than I am, but there's so much that you hear that's like, it's just so vapid, and kind of, the world would not be any worse off if it didn't exist. You know what I mean? So
I do.
yeah. So again, I hesitate to sort of look at what we do from any kind of big picture like that, because it's not my place to say, how much worth, something I'm involved with has, but that's what we try to do, and I always had this drive where I had to write, and it's like I can go so many ways. I can yeah. So hopefully, what we've come out with will touch people where they are, and they'll find something in it that they can relate to, or maybe will help them, or maybe will make them ask questions, or whatever.
Yeah. Some bright lights, I think, during the 7 years. You did a couple things with Neil Morse. How were those experiences, and how did those influence you as a composer and performer?
Oh wow. Well, the experiences were great. I mean, he's always been a musical hero of mine, and such a wonderful guy, as and I'm fortunate to be able to call him a friend now, because we've worked together enough, and so um with him, I'm always just in awe of how prolific he is, because that's so different from me. I mean, I have to labor over things for years, as you've seen, far too long sometimes to kind of make them happen. And he can just, drop of a hat, you know, I think a lot of it comes for him too, from those kind of formative years in LA
Mhm.
of being a professional working gigging musician, and kind of having to punch the clock and do it, to be able to pay rent. And so he's got even though that's so different from what he does now, he's got that experience to call back on, and that I think that's invaluable. But it was awesome. I mean, we got to work together on the Project Aegis song, and the rest of as Mystery that we did together, which was a huge honor for me, and Jesus Christ the Exorcist, and the Joseph album. So it's great. He'll just email me now and say, hey, I need some vocals for this, and are you up for putting something down, seeing how it sounds, and so yeah, of course, happy to, always an honor to work with him. So I'll send him something back, and then next thing I know, it's coming out on an album. So
You are officially one of the Neil Morse stable of artists.
exactly. It's I'm always happy for him to reach out to me. It's an honor.
Project Aegis is something that you have done here and there. What, there are 3 songs out at this point?
Right.
Is that something you intend to continue?
I hope so. Someone else asked me that, and I actually hadn't thought about it until then. So, um, long story short, we changed record labels for this new album. We signed with Atomic Fire, and our last 3 albums have come out on Ulterium Records, a Swedish label. And Emil from Ulterium, a great friend of mine, and there was no negative reason for the change or anything like that. He just said, I think he kind of reached a point similar to the one I reached, where he needed a break, and he came to us and said, I can't. He said, I know you guys are going to do another album. I can't do a big release right now. He said, I have to take some time off, take time for my family and whatever. And so he's stepping away. He said, but if you want to, I said, I'm happy to help you guys try to find a bigger label, or whatever you want to do. So so much of the time, the downtime between the albums was looking at all that. Do we want to self-release, which so many people are doing now? And there are lots of advantages to it, but we're all so busy. It's like, do any of us have the time? Do we want to sign with a different label? Long story, but yeah. So we signed with Atomic Fire, and that's been great so far. But the Project Aegis thing was actually Emil's idea originally from Ulterium. So if that continues, it'll still be the two of us, basically working on it together. So I'm sure that he would love to do another one, and I would love to do another one. If the right charity and the right idea and the right people come along.
Mm-hmm. What about touring?
We're definitely going to do something. There's that's all being discussed right now. The only concrete thing at the moment is this festival in Germany. Actually, the day the album comes out, October 13th. And then beyond that, we've got several other offers from festivals and things like that. So the discussion is, do we want to do? Yeah, again, with everyone's schedules, it becomes such an issue. So it's
Mm-hmm.
We have to make it count when we when we get together for a few weeks. So it's the current discussion is, do we want to do like we've done in the past, and hit some European festivals and tour around those over there? Do we want to do a more complete US run, which we've never really done? I mean, we've played a lot in the States, but it's all been sporadic and one-off stuff all over the place. So So that's the current discussion, but something will definitely happen, Lord willing. It's just a matter of deciding the right thing to do first, I guess.
Now, I know that there are certain composers slash musicians that by the time they get an album out, they've already got things halfway constructed for the next album. Are you that type of person, and have you already started looking ahead?
I've got a couple of songs, but it's always depended. I a lot of Mirror of Souls and As the World Bleeds were kind of written together, and so that was, even though there ended up being a couple of years between those two, but that ended up being sort of a quicker turnaround than we usually do. So there's nothing. I haven't done much. It's just a couple songs here and there, and as always, I have a big stockpile of ideas that hopefully can eventually turn into something more.
Mm-hmm. Always looking ahead, and trying to keep your feet on the ground for now.
Right.
Matt, it has been a pleasure, as always, to spend some time with you, and I'm really glad that things have sort of gone into the post-COVID era where you can, well, once you get over your COVID,
Right. Right.
that we can sort of all break out now and enjoy the music and do it in some positive ways.
Agreed. Likewise, my friend. It was great to speak to you again, and happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Matt Smith is the man behind bureaucracy and in front of bureaucracy, Theocracy as well. And the new album is called Mosaic. It is a great album, and I think you'll enjoy it a great deal. It is out on October 13th on Atomic Fire Records. And, I'm Mark Boardman. For the latest in music news and reviews and interviews, go to sonicperspectives.com.